Basically, I kind of got started with streaming maybe 7 years ago, something like that, working with Tom Green directing his show. And it was it's an interesting show because at that time it was really the beginning of kind of widespread live streaming and things like that. So we had a lot of challenges integrating social media to the show. So it's like you had a laptop here doing this, and then you're cutting the show over here, and then you're playing back video off of this, and then you're controlling the screen and back of it with this, and then you're mixing audio here. So I mean, it was like very early on. So every show was like a conglomeration of like 20 different computers doing 20 different things. And just how far things have come now. I mean, we always had challenges with just getting people to watch the show, letting people know about it. It's like the hardcore fans would find out about it, but it's like if you weren't a hardcore fan, then we're creating these amazing shows every day that were hilarious, and people were doing jumping off the roof into the pool and all this stuff, and nobody even knew it existed. So it was kind of an interesting time to come from there to where we are now. The other thing, social media, when you think about it, it's kind of a weird thing, 'cause it's one of those things that if you have a company or doing streaming, it's like the real easy, low-hanging fruit to like try to sound hip. Oh, we do social media and we put up a tweet, or like we can post your Facebook. But it's like that never actually typically doesn't really push the needle very much because it's not very well thought out. It's like a random tweet here, a random this there. It's not really something that's like psychologically thought through to like really make a difference as far as the actual production to really get eyeballs on it. Sometimes it is, but for the most part, not really. It's always kind of a by the way type of thing. The other thing you get is a lot of times people want to like just churn out a ton of content and just like look for quantity. It's like, let's syndicate as many clips as possible, as many things as possible. And you can see, look at something like YouTube, and it's like a sea of just like, it's like the thing in the Pacific Ocean. You know what I mean? There's just like all this stuff out there, and it's like now they're trying to like weed it out. So it's like you go there and you can find something that's really good. So it's like kind of curating it, and that's what everything's moving toward, like something that's curated with like just the really good content. So it's kind of like you can almost like negatively impact your show by creating a lot of noise if you really don't think it through very well. So it's something that it's a very key component to any production. And obviously all your clients want to see that you're like on the cutting edge and things like that, and and to make sure that you're kind of on the top of all the platforms and all that. So how do you really nail social media? It's a combination of both technology, and you're all here because we're talking about the TriCaster 8000 and all the social media functionality that's built into it. So there's that end, and that's the ability for everything. But then you also have the psychology of it, and that's equally important. So you have kind of 50-50. So obviously TriCaster has always been, the go-to platform for live production. It's been, everybody here, I'm sure you've used it, you're familiar with it. It's probably the most integrated thing out there. It's like pretty easy to use, like works perfectly. It's great. And we also know that like after every show, one of the first questions that anybody asks is how many people watched? How many views did we get? How many, how can we get more? So the big things, you have to know about the show to watch it. If you have like a celebrity on your show, that's you kind of have an easy gimme there because you can go to you tweet out to the celebrity's Twitter account, and you don't have to be super tricky or super manipulative to get a lot of people to watch because they have 50,000 people following them that are obsessed with them that'll watch either way. So you do things like you start a stream an hour early. You have a slate up for an hour, that type of stuff, just to get, like you ask Ustream or Livestream to front page you. So then you're sitting there for an hour on the front page hoping that people just show up and watch. Which, I mean, it works, but that's not really like the most targeted, smartest way to do it. That's kind of like sitting on the corner with a big sign and on the highway watching people drive by and people see you. I mean, they might not buy your product if it's on the corner of like the freeway. So before, with TriCaster and using this production, you had this super integrated setup. So it's like you had this, I don't know how many of you are like into cars or know about cars or anything like that, but it's like you had this race car, right? This super high performance race car. It can do anything. But it's like the driver can do everything except we're missing like the key differential, like the thing that actually spins the tires in the back, to really put that power to the ground 100%. So you can kind of get you might get a one-tire fire sometimes, but it's like always up to somebody else to actually push that needle in social media to get people to watch your show. So now you kind of have the ability to control it all from the same machine. So the director is like not only directing the show, but you're directing your presence everywhere in the world. So you kind of have complete control versus like having some random person somewhere else talking about stuff that might not be your vision. You know, they might be taking some photo that doesn't really represent the show. You know, so you kind of have control over everything now. So that's kind of, it's a pretty big deal because you could do it real time before. And the big thing with real time before is like you always have to have somebody that would be actually capturing this footage. So it's an extra crew member that's tweeting this stuff out, that's capturing it, compressing it, uploading it, that type of stuff, making those decisions. So, and not every show has that. I mean, we all know that on web shows, like every once in a while, you have a great client that has a huge budget and you can spend a ton of money and you can hire whoever you need to hire to make everything work, but that's not always the case. So as opposed to having a show where you just cut that element out and then the whole thing suffers, now you can kind of control it all in one place. There's never an excuse. You don't have to worry about it. It's all kind of built into the same setup. And with that, kind of directing is basically taken another step forward. So with TriCaster, it already kind of changed. You know, before you had your traditional setup where you had 20 different people doing 20 different jobs, and you know, and then you had one person that was kind of tying it all together. And with TriCaster, you know, you had the director that was basically directing the show and controlling everything. So you're kind of one person driving this car, if you want to keep on going with that analogy. And so now, like, the director's also controlling the social media. So, you know, people freak out before when you could do like, oh, can you do audio, can you do video and playback graphics and all this at the same time? And so now they can like freak out because you're going to be doing social media as well. So, let's see here. So the big thing when you think about, when I was talking before about how you'd have some other person capturing things or you have like a photographer on site that's taking photos and syndicating these things out to Twitter or whatever. The big difference, and you know, when you first look at the fact that you can do social media at a TriCaster, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's neat, you know, right? Like, so, but how is that really different? So when you really think about it, it's like the first time that you can actually do everything live. So it's part of that same show as it's happening. You're not waiting till afterwards, till somebody dumps their CF card and then uploads that photo. You're not waiting till a video is edited afterward and the bumpers are put on and that's sent up. It's actually happening while the show is happening. So it's kind of the first time that, like, in the driver's seat, pretty seamlessly, as you're going through the show, you can send all this stuff out, which is kind of a big deal with like no extra cost. It's kind of a big deal because it's the same vision. So when these people are watching it, and we'll get into audience in a second, the different types of audience that you want to kind of hit, they're actually seeing what they're going to see if they tune into your show. They're not seeing like a photo that was taken with a different type of camera that looks completely different, that's shooting something that isn't part of the live show, or like a shot of the venue that like you'll never cut to because it's somewhere else. They're going to see exactly what they're going to see. So it's kind of like, it's an accurate representation of like, come watch my show, this is why it's awesome. It's an exact representation of that. But with that, you have to also remember that, like, you know, the person that's actually running the thing has to be pretty dialed in. You know, and a lot of people have this thing where it's like you can just be an operator and, you know, you press the buttons and all that. Whereas now, like I was saying before, it's kind of, there's decision making involved, like, you know, sending out the right content, not just clipping out things, not just sending random photos. Like, you have to be like directing the show, but actually saying like, that was a really good moment. That's going to get people to watch. Like, that was something that's kind of controversial. We need to send that out. That's going to hit this type of audience. This is going to hit that type of audience. So it's kind of like before you hit the share button, because it's really easy to do, and they make it really easy, you have to really kind of think about it, because sometimes less is more as far as that goes. So I'm sure you've all kind of been somewhat familiar with how the whole thing works, but I'll kind of go over it a little bit just so, you know, without kind of going through the whole manual, because that's always a great part of a presentation. So, you know, you connect your accounts in live production beforehand. You can do like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, FTP accounts. Sharing across just shared disks is really reliable now. In the past, that was kind of like here or there, but I mean, you can connect a disk and you can share to it, grab from it while you're streaming, while you're recording. It won't crash anything, it won't lock up the interface. It's really, really solid. And that's great for things that aren't necessarily as easy as just posting a photo. Sometimes there's a little bit more complexity that you're adding into your social media. So like just being able to share a disk, you can just share those assets with somebody else that can like do whatever they need to do to those files, send them back to you, you can upload them, which is kind of valuable too, because not everything is so, you know, one click. So you'll do that, you enter your credentials, everything's connected, you go into live production, share tab, everything's there. You have the ability when you do a tweet, you can hashtag it, you can do anything like that, descriptions, all that type of stuff, just as you would in any other application, so you can follow trends and things like that. Preparing things is easy as, you know, with a photo, It's obviously just you're sending the photo with videos. You can scrub in and outs, which is kind of nice. So if you have a capture, you can grab that, set your precise in and out point. You can send that up. If you're feeding your encoder an aux output, you can actually use your DDRs. You can roll back and forth. You can add bumpers onto it, which we do a lot during Fashion Week. I'll talk about that in a second. So that way, as opposed to going through Final Cut or having a separate editor or something like that, build all these highlights, you could take these as you're going through the show, roll them back and forth. You have these fully built things. You right-click, you're uploading in the background. By the time their show's over, your highlights are uploaded. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to sit there until 2 a.m. It's already done. It's where it needs to be, which is great because a lot of times, that's when people start to get angry because it's like they're waiting and you're encoding and it takes time. But it's like here, you have a 3-hour show. By the time it's done, everything's encoded. It's where it needs to get. So it's pretty easy. So the whole sharing process, the whole functionality of it, pretty straightforward. The big thing about it is the audience, right? So there's a couple different types of audience, and you guys might have a couple other ideas as far as different types of groups that you want to reach. So we can go through that a little bit later during the Q&A. But the ones that I kind of always think about are you have your active viewers, right? So those are the people that are already watching your show. So these people tuned in, they're excited about it. They're like your fans they're like the people that would be already watching the Tom Green show. So we'd be doing our show, they watch it every week, they love the show. I don't have to twist their arm to watch it, they're gonna be there. They're gonna do what they have to do to get there. So what kind of content do you wanna send these people? Do you wanna send them a clip of the show? It's gonna be boring. They've already seen it, they don't care about that, they're watching it. You wanna send them a still of the set? No, but what you can do for that type of stuff, behind the scenes looks, if you have the ability to have another cut that maybe you don't always put live, then you can grab clips out of that. So then you're kind of showing them a behind the scenes look, giving them something a little bit exclusive, they're kind of like the people in the priority access lane at the airport. It's like you expect a little bit more. You don't want just the same treatment as everybody else. You kind of want to feel a little bit special. So, they have something unique that you want to send them to really hit home with that audience. You have your potential viewers, so people that they might not know about the event. Pretty easy sell. If you can get them something interesting, they'll tune in. But with that, what's interesting, right? Do you want to just send them a random clip of two talking heads interviewing each other? Something usually a little edgy, something like that, just to get people to tune in. These are people that have the ability to kind of tune into the show. They're just sitting around. All they have to do is log into it. But the big thing that you can do with the 8,000 is more of a kind of the eavesdropping viewers. So those are kind of the other two are kind of just existing audiences that everybody here probably knows about, right? So, but the eavesdropping viewers is kind of there's a lot of these shows that maybe you don't plan on watching it. There's a lot of times a show is on, I have no enthusiasm to watch it. I've been doing something all day, I don't plan on watching it, but I can tune into my, open up my Twitter feed, a couple pictures come through. I kind of by reading a couple tweets from a couple different people the next day, I kind of got the gist of exactly what happened without even watching it. So it's kind of you're tuning in additional people that aren't actually watching our live broadcast by sending them clips from the actual show. So that's kind of something, and there's different forms of media you can do that with. A lot of times, if you don't have a really good connection, you're not going to be able to watch it on your mobile device if you have a really awful connection, but you can send them stills. If there's a couple key moments, you can take a couple stills, you can send those out. That's pretty easy. People can always catch that stuff. So again, in that, it's not necessarily about quantity, more about quality. Kind of not elevator music type of clips, but very targeted things to different genres of people. The way you kind of think about that is no matter where you are as far as region, age, or what kind of content you're producing, because it's all going to be different depending on who the client is and all that. All human beings are kind of grouped into very specific psychological groups. So you can kind of send something that would resonate with a group in the United States, and it would be the same in another part of the world just because certain people respond to different things. In terms of types of events, you have things you have your live show, where TriCaster is the machine that's creating the main event. Social media is just supporting that. So that's kind of what we talked about, where you're doing your line cut, you're using social media to maybe just create deliverables or something like that, just sharing that in the background, uploading it to an FTP or to YouTube or something like that, and taking the workload off of somebody else after the show. So content, obviously, in that case, is just repackaged. The audience for that, typically, completely offsite. So that's you're streaming to people. It's not really a live event where people are in a venue, you're trying to amp up the crowd, that type of stuff. we do a lot of, that's kind of similar to our workflow for Fashion Week. It's the people that are on site. It's not like it's a sporting event where everybody's like super excited and things like that. People are there, they're watching the fashion show, but afterwards, like people all around the world, not everybody can go to New York Fashion Week. So, they'll watch it on YouTube. So it's like they get all these highlights, but they want it quick. You don't want to watch it like next week. It's like it happens, they're ready to go 10 minutes after the show's done. There's another, you go to a live show where TriCaster is more creating just social media. And so maybe there's a television production in place. And the neat thing about the 8000 is a lot of pretty advanced functionality in it. So you can create a lot of really neat things. So it's not so much about, it's not so much about like taking something from a show you're creating, but you can use like advanced tracking, things like that. You build that into your own little product, and then you could supplement a TV show or something like that. We did that for Super Bowl in New Orleans. And what we did there, this thing, hashtag SB postcard. And so it's kind of neat. Like it was designed to feed both on-site and off-site audience. And so people would submit their photos. They'd hashtag them all SB postcard, and they'd just be like from whatever, right? So we had about 30 predetermined bits that we had with Carissa Thompson. And then what we would do is we'd use advanced tracking. We shot all these bits with a green screen card. She'd like hold up this card, then put it down, and then hold it up again. And in between there'd be some comedy bit that we'd have like kind of like these three, I guess you can call them like derelict elves or something like that, but they're kind of just these like weird guys that would do like something funny, like hit it with a hammer, or pour Gatorade on her or something like that. And then like the idea was that the photo would change, so she puts it down, picks it up, it's a different photo. And so what we would do is, the first time she holds it up, it's a fan photo, something that was submitted that's automatically being dropped into a shared folder. The edit happens, we switch to a different ME, and then she picks up the card, moves it around, advanced tracking keeps it like spot on, and then it's a postcard version of it. So it's all composited real time, and then these people see this, and if you're on site, we'd have a lot of them on site, and it's like, somebody does that, and then 30 seconds later they appear on a postcard on the screen, TV's going to break, they come out on the wide jib shot, and then they see their face on the screen, everybody cheers, it's like super exciting. And if you're at home, it's still kind of the same thing. I mean, it's always kind of cool to get that. And then what we would do with all those is, we set our in and out point precisely, right click, or on the control surface, hit share, and send it right up to YouTube. So then you can go on YouTube, you can find your clip, you can put it on your Facebook, show everybody, hey, look, Sports Nation made this for me, everybody's super excited, they're happy, they got their own custom clip. And I mean, it was really easy. I mean, like, as far as the workflow goes, I mean, I think we were able to turn around like over 100 clips that week. I mean, and it was probably the longest any of them took were maybe 10 seconds longer than the actual bit length itself. So they're all pretty fast. The third thing is going to be, as far as event-wise, so we have the one where the TriCaster's providing the main show, supplementing with social media. Then we have TriCaster creating the social media, supplementing a TV show. Then you have kind of a hybrid show, which is kind of similar to what we do at X Games. So just in Barcelona, what we did was we're providing the line cut for the venue. So you have this huge venue of people, everybody's excited. So you're not necessarily creating the TV show, but what you're doing is you're creating kind of the TV show for the venue to keep everybody excited. So you have this thing where you're on the air for 12, 14 hours a day, it varies, but so the goal is you got to just keep stuff going on, keep the crowd engaged during this long event. It's going on at different venues all over the place. So you're creating a line cut, you're supplementing it with graphics, standard video rolls, the normal things that you always have in a show. And then in addition to that, we were pulling photos from different hashtags, compositing them into images, and kind of the same idea as Super Bowl a little bit. But people would be submitting this stuff all day, and we got a ton of stuff from venue. We kind of started doing this. They implemented this in Foz, in Brazil, and then moved on in Barcelona. It kind of really, it really hit there. But I mean, we would probably get 60 to 70 photos per each event, and that was. Each competition is maybe an hour or so, and that's people on site. So I mean, if you think about like the amount of people that are in the crowd that are actually gonna take a photo and hashtag it, that's not too bad. Because most people see that type of stuff and couldn't care less about it. But it's like it was actually engaging the audience to be able to see it turned around so quickly. So if you want to see, I'll show you a Fashion Week video here. This will take a second to negotiate. So like you can see these bumpers and things like that. So I was talking about like for the Fashion Week, and this is more. So when we actually shoot the video, you just get this. So So you have this, the bug's not on there. We have several different versions of this. We shoot it both clean, and then for the stuff that goes to YouTube, it has to have the bug, it has to have bumpers and all this. So we basically create like 3 different versions of this clip. And the thing about these shows that's kind of crazy is that, you know, you'll have a show that's 15 minutes, but then the next show starts right after, like maybe 15 minutes later. So it's like show after show after show after show. And I think, I want to say this last season we did 77 shows that were live, and then I think 120 total. But even the ones that weren't live were still live in the sense of they're one after the other. So they're kind of live for us. They just weren't streamed to the web. But you know, in that type of workflow, we had one operator and then one assistant that was kind of helping with pulling music and things like that. So you have one guy that's doing all this, and it's like you have to just keep up with that workflow. And if you fall behind, then you'll never catch up on it. And so by doing that, we were able to replace 2 Final Cut Pro machines, because the year before we had everybody doing all these edits on Final Cut, exporting them, and we constantly had this problem of having to go from one machine to the other, to the other, to the other, because you know one wouldn't be done, this one wouldn't be done. But with the 8000, it's kind of like you can build that together, you can send it right up to YouTube, send it right up to YouTube, send it to the AEG FTP, and you never fall behind. It just queues it up, it works on it in the background. So, and then at the end, you know, another bumper at the end that just kind of gets added onto it. And then this was the SB postcard thing. So these were all just different composited clips. So she'd pulled this over, and this is, you know, the original photo that somebody sent over. Then we had, you know, 30 different versions of this. People would just come over and kind of do whatever. Some of them were better than others. We had a couple that were team specific. The Gatorade dump one, that was kind of funny. But then she would flip it over, and that's the composited version. So it's all been in real time. It aired on the big screen. Everybody was really excited about it. So that's kind of an example of those 2 events. The X Games event, I don't have a clip of that, but if you've seen any of that, it's kind of, I mean, you can kind of think of it as, it's similar in the vein of like if you've been to a basketball game, that type of stuff. But it's just, you know, a basketball game is an hour or 2, and this is a 14-hour event that you're kind of keeping people engaged the entire time. So, you know, basically, the big thing for me with social media and the 8000 is kind of really utilizing, thinking about what you're putting out there, really using psychology and kind of applying that to the technology. And kind of like, I guess if you wanted to get like real like some kind of catchphrase, it'd be like kind of like bringing analog back to digital a little bit. You know, because I feel like sometimes people just like to send as much stuff, and we can churn out as much garbage as we can, but it's not necessarily like, with the 8000 you have that ability to kind of like really choose what you want to do and really have control over everything. So if you're directing the show, like you don't have to count on somebody else to make the right choice. You're doing it, you saw a moment, you can pick it, you can send it out, and you can make it exactly how you want it to be. So if anybody can kind of open it up to questions now, if you have any.
I really appreciate learning a lot more about the 8000. I'm really excited to use it. But as a director and an operator, yes, of course, it's a lot to do everything else.
Yeah.
I tend to cut pretty fast
Yeah.
and tight, and so I can't imagine editing on top of cutting very fast and communicating it.
Well, I mean, it depends on the type of show you're doing. I mean, like I said, like the postcard thing, that was something that we were supplementing to TV. So we weren't really cutting a show while we were doing that.
Right, but you are cutting a show while you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I cut a show too, and it really depends on how you want to kind of get everything set up. I mean, it's hard to speculate on different workflows, you know, before you do it. But I mean, you know, for X Games, we were able to do everything and get everything kind of configured in a way where it was pretty automated.
So you had some period of time where you had a
Well, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, before the actual show started, we were able to kind of, you know, get everything dialed in. But once we're in the live production, it didn't really impact it too much. That's kind of the nice thing that I found about it, and same for Fashion Week, is it's pretty quick on the whole thing. I mean, for that show too, you do have, between shows, you have a couple minutes to kind of roll that back and forth to create that sharing. But, you know, as far as, I guess it depends on how much editing like you're planning on doing. You know what I mean? If you're talking about doing clips, it's kind of like ins and outs. You know, most shows have video rolls, You know, so I mean, during a video roll, you could do that. So there's a lot of opportunities. You know, if you're coming out to a high and wide, you can get that loaded in. If you're cutting to somebody, like have a guest that's talking and somebody goes on for like a long rant for 10, 15 seconds, you can do a quick in and out and send it up. I mean, like I said, it's one of those things where I've found that like in the course of any live show, there's always a moment to get something done. But I mean, just talking about it, it's hard to predict something before we're actually doing the show, you know? But I mean, there's ways to do different things. And maybe in the course of that show, I mean, maybe it's something where you just decide to do stills. You know, I mean, maybe you don't want to be doing stuff where you're sending out video clips. Maybe you don't want to do something super complex. It depends on what type of show it is. Like if it's a super fast-paced concert, maybe there's something else. Maybe you're going to do something like, you know, we're developing something for Munich, for X Games, that we're going to do with all the music concerts. Because that's exactly your point. You know, it's a lot of fast cutting. It's a concert. You can't be sitting there like sitting on a wide shot while you're like fiddling with clips and things like that. But you know, that being said, we kind of thought of a solution to that to still utilize everything to let people start like tweeting out their own photos, creating their own postcards, that type of stuff. So you know, there's ways to kind of work around stuff and make things work depending on whatever the show is. And that's kind of the nice thing about it, is that it's not super set in stone. It's not something where it's like you can only do this, you can only do this. You have kind of the base functionality, and you can kind of adjust it. And I mean, you guys know that that's kind of how the whole machine works. It's one of those things where there's X amount of things that technically it can do, but when it comes down to it, you can make it do a plethora of things if you really want to. So.
Is that something the macro can do?
What's that?
Can you program a macro to?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, there's things like that. I mean, you could program a macro to handle a lot of that stuff. So, I mean, there's ways to kind of make pretty much anything that you want happen. But that's part of being the director on the show. So, anybody else?
It gives you more time to prepare all that.
What was that?
With the social media, it gives you more time to actually prepare your other things to present.
Yeah, well, I mean.
Throw it to that and give you more time.
Yeah, well, I mean, like we're saying, if you're going to throw to a clip or something like that, then you have more time to scrub your clips and things like that. But the nice thing about it, like I was saying, is that you can kind of send out exactly the vision that you want from the show. You know, like you can make these things happen as you're doing the show. It's not like you're relying on somebody else. Like you can cut a show on Twitter while you're cutting a show on Ustream. You know, and somebody can be on their phone, and every 5 minutes they get an update that says like it's a photo of somebody doing Tom dumped a bowl of salad on somebody's head, and it's like, oh, I saw that moment of the show, and then maybe tomorrow when you have time you watch it, you know?
We're curious how your friends are doing.
Yeah.
I've never seen this guy before. You had a question?
So I have a question on,
Yeah.
on shows that you've worked on. What shows have you actually integrated Twitter feeds into the shows, where you're taking just a real-time feed from the world and streaming it out, like the X Games where they do the ticker? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, so actually on X Games, we did that with XG Fan. And so that was something that they started in Foz, where it was kind of like similar to the SB postcard idea, where it was fans submitting their photos, but we integrated that feed and we were able to pull those photos in real time, because you know, manually getting all those photos, manually loading them in the course of a live show while there's a million things going on, and rally car gets rained out, and then everybody's there, you know, it's like there's a million things going on, so you can't be like fiddling with a lot of that stuff. But yeah, like automating it like that, and this, you know, have your background ready, composite that on top, and then you have like 15 seconds out of commercial break. You come out of commercial break, announcer recaps that for a second, you can roll through a couple photos, and then, you know, back into competition. And it's like seamless as if you planned it out from the beginning. You know, it's a great thing like that you can fill in. I mean, because a lot of times you have competition holds. I mean, and they can go from, you know, first of all, like they say, we have a 2-minute hold in this competition, and then it goes to a 15-minute hold. And then, you know, you've planned out for it to be on time, and now you can fill 2 minutes of content with a commercial break, but filling 15 minutes of content, you have to kind of start getting creative. So it's nice to be able to, especially in a long show like that, it's nice to be able to utilize some of that stuff and leverage it to show people on site something interesting that's not just like a generic video roll that they've seen in another venue. You know, they were watching skateboard this morning and they saw the same stuff. So it's kind of nice to bring in something a little bit more rich to kind of get people excited about it.
Anybody else? No?
Anybody else? Well, and not that it's not the best idea. What I was just saying is that that's kind of one of the ways that we've always relied on getting a lot of viewers. It's kind of the same, you know, you get a slate and you put it up for an hour. But, you know, I was just saying that this is a way that even if you start the show on time and it's something, I mean, not every show allows you to have a slate. Sometimes, like, you have to start at a certain time and you don't really have that ability to have a slate. But doing that through the 8,000, you can kind of send things out. People might miss the first 5 minutes, but it's not like you're counting on getting everybody right at the beginning, and then if you don't have them at the beginning, they're not going to see it. You know, you can be sending things out, something funny happens, then maybe some crazy moment happens 10 minutes into the show, you send that out, and all of a sudden a ton of people show up and watch it because you send it out with the right hashtag.
Well, that's,
You know?
yeah, I was thinking like how you send out the tweets. I mean, on the 8,000, you actually type in the tweet. Like,
Yeah, you can have, well, the description and everything, right.
Okay, because I was thinking how you get more people that way. I mean, we only have a limited number of Twitter followers, and you know, but I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you hashtag it the certain thing, you know, then people are searching for, you know, whatever the event is, the X Factor or something like that, and that pops up like photos from the show. Oh my gosh, Beyonce just performed. She's like a secret guest on the show. Then everybody runs over there and goes to watch. But it's kind of, you're not really, it just gives you a lot more flexibility when you're in show. You're not so like counting on everybody to be there beforehand. And you're not counting on somebody else to make it happen because you have the ability to do it right there. Like real time, you don't have to like, that was a great moment, but nobody's gonna see it until an hour after the show because we don't have anybody to edit it. So.
Have you done any shows where the TD is running on the control surface and you have somebody else doing social media on the UI?
I haven't yet. Most of the stuff that I've done has been kind of one person kind of running the whole thing. But I mean, you could always do it and split it up that way if you wanted to. Any other questions from anybody?
So it doesn't hold up the machine or the software if one person is editing and tweeting out and sharing while you're cutting the show separately. If you're doing it
Right, on the control, yeah, exactly, if you're using control surface, right. Well, that's it for this session. If anybody has any other questions? An 8,000? No, I didn't, unfortunately. We had it's actually back in LA, but it would have been great to show it live, so. You can go and see it at the new tech booth, and I can walk over there with you guys and show you how all the stuff works.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for coming.